All right, welcome into another edition of the Redzone Oklahoma Preview Show, week number 3. I'm your host, Michael Knight, the director of Redzone Oklahoma, and it's the final week of non-district play, the final tune-ups for a lot of teams across the state of Oklahoma as we get ready to enter district play next week, the final week of September. Games start counting towards playoff seeding, district standings, all of those things. So the final tune-ups coming up this week. A lot of really good small school football across the state of Oklahoma. A lot of those large schools in 6A1, 6A2, even in 5A. They played in week 0, 1, and 2, and so they're taking this week off as kind of a refresher before district play begins next week. But in this episode, we got another jam-packed show, another really good show talking all things Oklahoma high school football. And we're going to kick things off with a breakdown on the 10 best games for week 3. Again, you can check out that article right now on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma. We're also going to be joined by 3 different coaches that are going to be coaching in some of those top games this week. Starting with Choctaw head coach Jake Corbin. We'll also be joined by Carl Albert head coach Mike Dunn. And we'll finish things up with Heritage Hall head coach Brett Bogert before diving into our next segment, which is breaking down some of the best players to watch in those top matchups, the 10 players to watch for week number 3. Following that, we'll be taking a look, an early look at the Player of the Year watch list. Every single Thursday on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma, we add 3 more players to the Player of the Year watch list. Of course, we announce that winner at the end of the season. We have 10 finalists in December that get announced, and then we announce it in early January who the best player in Oklahoma for 2025 is. We'll add 3 more names to that watch list at the end of this show. And then before we get out of here, we're going to give you a sneak peek on what is to come on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma, what kind of coverage you can expect for week 3 as far as in-game coverage, post-game coverage, things like that, both here on the YouTube channel as well as online at prepredzone.com/Oklahoma. But right now, as we do each and every single week, we're going to kick things off by taking a look at the 10 best games for week number 3, and we lead it off with a 4A 5A matchup. It's Blanchard going on the road to take on the Guthrie Blue Jays. The Blanchard Lions coming into this week at number 7 in our Class 4A rankings. They got their week 1 victory for first-year head coach Lance Manning, but they are coming off a tough loss to Newcastle. They lost 63-40, but that's a game where they dropped down 21-0. After that, Blanchard played really good, but the problem is you fell down 21-0. So it's hard to climb out of that hole when you have something like that happen. But they're going on the road to take on a Guthrie team that lost in week 0, took a bye week in week 1, and then bounced back last week with a win over Duncan. This is the Guthrie team that went to the 5A state title game a year ago. They were the 5A runner-up. They're a team that expects to make a trip back to Edmond this year. Again, for Blanchard, that's a 4A team that I think that as they continue to learn more about their identity, they're going to be a fun team to watch, specifically in the passing game. Their passing game had an outstanding performance last week against Newcastle. Our next game, it's a rare matchup where you see number 1 facing number 1, defending champ versus defending champ. It's 6A1 champ Bixby hosting 6A2 champ Choctaw. For the Choctaw Yellow Jackets, they returned to the road for the 3rd consecutive game. They opened the season down in Texas against a Lubbock team. They went up to Kansas last week, lost a heartbreaker in that matchup. This is the 3rd straight road game for the Choctaw Yellow Jackets. They are the defending 6A2 champs. They haven't had much success in this series against Bixby, but you know that Choctaw is not going to back down from a fight, despite what happens in Friday night's game. Look, just full disclosure, let's just talk openly here. Choctaw's the underdog, and rightfully so, when you look at what Bixby's been able to do, but they're not going to back down from a fight. And speaking, with transparency, I really don't care what happens on Friday night in this game. I still think Choctaw is one of the best teams in their class. Regardless, I mean, we saw it last year. They lost to Bixby at home. They went on to win the state championship. So everything for Choctaw is still in front of them following this game. For Bixby, they are the defending 6A1 state champs. I've talked about it on this show. I've talked about it on other shows. We've written about it on Prep Red Zone. This could very well be Lauren Montgomery's most talented team. we make the joke at Prep Red Zone that Bixby is in full Death Star mode, minus the part at the end of the movie where the Death Star explodes. They are a team that can absolutely destroy you in the blink of an eye. We've seen that so far this season. I think that they'll continue to do so. Now, Bixby, I don't look, Bixby's one of those programs where you don't ever worry about them looking ahead, but they do have a huge matchup next week against Jinx on the road. That's number one versus number two. Those are the two best teams right now in 6A1. They can't look ahead. They can't look past Choctaw because Choctaw does have very talented players on both sides of the ball. But Bixby, if they get caught sneaking a peek at next week's matchup against the Jinx Trojans, things could be a problem there in Bixby on Friday night. Next game is Plainview hosting Davis. That's 2A2 versus Class 3A. For Davis, they are the number one ranked team in Class 2A2. They are your defending 2A2 champion, and they continue to play that very brutal non-district schedule. We saw it last year as we knew that they were going to test themselves early on, and they did just that. They started the season 0-3, but they rallied to win the state championship. People forget about that. That was a Davis team that went into the playoffs at 6-4. They had to beat three straight undefeated teams to win the state title. They were able to do just that. They're taking on a Plainview team that's off to a 2-0 start. Over the weekend, Plainview jumped into the 3A rankings. Probably should have been there to begin with, but look, that's the beauty of doing weekly rankings. You can fix some mistakes along the way, but for Plainview, they're playing really well under their first year head coach. And they have a lot of young talent that I think the state is going to start recognizing here very soon. Do they have enough to make a run in Class 3A? Obviously, that class is headlined by Lincoln Christian as well as Sulphur, among several other top contenders. Is Plainview right now as a dark horse, maybe flying under the radar a little bit? Could they make a run at the 3A championship? First, they have to take care of Davis on Friday night, and that's not going to be an easy matchup for Plainview. Our next game, 5A versus 4A, another 5A, 4A clash. It's Newcastle hosting Elgin. Elgin is your top-ranked team in Class 4A. They are the defending state champions. They got off to a 2-0 start and looked really dominant. They beat up Lawton MacArthur in week 0. Then they beat a Texas team in week 1, a game that was actually called in the third quarter. And they're coming off a bye week, so they're fresh. They're ready to go. They didn't have to play a full 4 quarters in quite some time. So they go on the road to take on a Newcastle team that we mentioned earlier with that breakdown against Blanchard. Newcastle lost their season opener, but they were able to light up the scoreboard last week against Blanchard. Actually, I said that they lost their opener. They beat Bartlesville in the opener. They lost to Tuttle, and then they bounced back last week against Blanchard by lighting up the scoreboard. I mentioned they jumped out to that 21-0 lead, and that was able to give them some cushion as they were able to score 63 points in the win over Blanchard. They scored in all 3 phases: offense, defense, and special teams. For Elgin, last test before they go into district play. And honestly, when you're looking at their schedule, I think this might be the last test until the playoffs. Elgin looking like a team that can go on to the state championship in Class 4A. All the way down in Class A for A1 and A2, we have Hominy going on the road to take on Pawnee. It's Hominy, number 5 in Class A2. They got off to a good start with a rivalry win over Cleveland, but they followed that up with a rivalry loss to Pawhuska. They're facing another top 10 team in Class A1 this week, but Hominy, that's a team, after watching them in person 2 weeks ago, I think they have what it takes to contend in Class A2. In that Pawhuska game, you can't just judge it by the final score. That game was close at halftime. They only trailed by a point to the Huskies. Pawhuska was able to run away with that one. But Hominy is a team that I think you can start taking very seriously in Class A2. For the Pawnee Black Bears, this is a team that might be flying under the radar in Class A1. They had a huge win in week 1 to open the season, but they lost a high-scoring matchup against Stroud last week. So they're a team that's also coming off a loss. So an interesting matchup here as you have Hominy and Pawnee, two teams in northern Oklahoma that expect to be contending for a state championship. Both teams are coming off a loss. Both teams want to get back in the winners column before entering a district that features some very, very tough competition. Our next game, you go up to the Oklahoma City area. You have Millwood going on the road, short road trip over to Heritage Hall. And this is a rare matchup where we've seen these two teams match up in non-district play over the last several years, nearly a decade now since they started playing each other. This is a rare week where both teams are coming off a loss. For Millwood, they're number 5 in our 2A1 rankings. They opened the season last week with a rare Soul Bowl loss to rival Douglas on Saturday afternoon. For Millwood, it was just a scheduling issue where they weren't able to get a full 10-game schedule. They actually had week 0 slotted for a scrimmage. They had week 1 off, and then last week was actually their season opener in a rivalry game against Douglas. So not the easiest way to open the season. And now you follow that up by going on the road to take on Heritage Hall. Heritage Hall ranked number 3 in our Class 3A rankings, and they're going to be ready to get back on the field. They lost to Lincoln Christian in week 1 on the road in Tulsa, 35-6, and they had to sit and just kind of wait for their opportunity. They had a bye week after the Lincoln Christian loss, so they're going to be ready to get on the field. And historically in this series, this is one between Heritage Hall and Millwood that the Chargers have been able to dominate, but it's one of those non-district series that I love to watch because no matter what happens on Friday night, both teams expect and possibly will contend for the state title in their respective classes. Moving into southeastern Oklahoma, you have Vian hosting Pecola. That's number 3 Pecola in Class A1. They're off to a hot start this season. Their offense is kind of what we expected it would be. They return their quarterback, they return their top playmaker, a wide receiver. They have some new pieces coming along on the offensive side of the ball. We knew that Pecola would be good in their respective class, but now comes the toughest test on the regular season schedule. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say that because they are in a district with defending champion Rejoice Christian. But as far as the early slate, like Pecola, when it comes to this matchup against Vian, the Wolverines have absolutely owned this series against Pecola. You look at Vian, they're number 2 in Class 2A2. They were the runner-up in that class last season. They expect to make a trip back to Edmond again this year. And, this is going to be a Vian team that's not feeling too good after the way last week ended. They had Kiefer on the ropes. They had a decent lead against the Trojans, and then Kiefer was able to come back and stun the Wolverines in the final minute. So Vian coming into this game at 1-1, they ran through the regular season last year undefeated. That won't be the case this season. I was at the Vian Pecola game last season. It was not close. Vian was dominant. Their star running back Mason Wright was dominant. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Does this series get closer as Pecola continues to try to chip away at the Vian series? I'm looking forward to seeing Pecola later on, just a few weeks from now, as they'll take on Rejoice Christian. Those two games will tell you a lot about Pecola and whether or not they're a true state championship contender. And for Vian, it's very simple. Bounce back, get a win, move into district play, and shift your focus to contending for the district and eventually a possible state championship. We mentioned Rejoice Christian. They're our next game to watch as they hit the road to go to Del City as they will take on Christian Heritage in a rematch of last year's Class A1 semifinal. Rejoice Christian, the defending state champion in A1. They are number 1 right now. They had a bye week last week, and that was coming off a loss to Catch a Hall in week 1. So kind of similar to what I said about Heritage Hall earlier, how Rejoice, they lost, and then they had to sit around and wait. And so now they're going to sit around, they're going to get on a bus, they're going to head to Del City, and they're going to try to take out their frustrations on the Christian Heritage Crusaders, who I'm still unsure about. I don't know what to think about Christian Heritage because they lost their season opener. They are still a top 5 team in Class A1 because the team they lost to is another top 5 team. So it's like, well, you can't really take that against them. They shut out Crooked Oak last week, so they bounced back with a big win there. This is without a doubt, when you look at Christian Heritage's schedule, this is without a doubt the toughest game on the schedule. So I'm curious as to what the Crusaders are going to be in 2025. Are they going to be a team that makes it back to the semifinals. They win the district. Are they going to be one of those teams? Or are they going to be a team that, starts out hot in the top five and then, just kind of fizzles out? That's going to be a tough district for them as well. So interesting to see what happens there. As I said, these two teams met in the semifinals. They also met in the regular season last year. Rejoice Christian was able to sweep those two meetings in 2024. So big eyes will be on that as far as Class A1 because you have two top five teams squaring off in mid-September. Back up, kind of staying in the same area as far as the state of Oklahoma over at Carl Albert. As the defending 5A champs will be hosting Stillwater. I cannot wait to see what happens in this one. Not going to be there, unfortunately, as you'll hear later on in the show with head coach Mike Dunn. I'm kind of, I'm on the fence a little bit, kind of having some, pre-game FOMO, missing out. Look, the game I'm going to should be a good one, but man, this one should be great. As Carl Albert hosts Stillwater. Stillwater, number 2 in our 6A2 rankings. They're 2-0 on the season after beating Union and Enid. Their offense has been absolutely dominant through the first two games, averaging well over 50 points a game. They go on the road and try to snap Carl Albert's 41-game winning streak. And if you watched this show last week, I was asked the question, whose winning streak goes down next? Is it Carl Albert? Is it Lincoln Christian? Turns out it was actually Tipton last week. They had their winning streak snapped. Of course, that's 8-man football down in Class C. But I said Carl Albert has to watch out for this Stillwater matchup. Carl Albert is the number 1 team in Class 5A. They are the defending 5A champs. They have won 41 consecutive games, and they have been dominant so far through the first 2 games. They beat Midwest City with ease. They shut out Lawton Eisenhower. Their running back, Elijah Matthews, looks like he's the next running back stud for the Carl Albert Titans moving forward. And we talk with head coach Mike Dunn later on in the show more about the Titans, but this is a fantastic matchup to watch. Honestly, like it's probably the game of the week. It has that kind of anticipation. It has that kind of momentum right now. Looking forward to seeing what happens there as Carl Albert hosts Stillwater. And finally, the game that I will be at on Friday night up in northern Oklahoma, it's the Pawhuska Huskies hosting Woodland. That is A1 versus A2, and the number 2 teams in each class as well. You have number 2 Woodland, your defending Class A2 champion. Things have looked a little different this season compared to last year. They were dominating everybody on their way to going 14-0 and capturing that state championship. They lost their season opener this year, but they beat Morrison last week in a close one. But I'm going to tell you what, I don't know. I don't know what Woodland is yet. That's why I'm looking forward to seeing them in person this week. Coming into this season, I knew that Woodland might take just a bit of a step back. I knew they weren't going to be as dominant as they were last year. I do still think that they're a state championship contender, but they had a lot of really good players to replace from last season's championship team. So they're another one of those teams early on in the year that are still trying to figure out their identity. Those new faces are still trying to come along. So this is a tough test against a Pawhuska team that is off to a fast start. They're 3-0. As I mentioned, they beat Hominy last week. They ran away from the Bucks in the second half. They have looked really dominant. I'm really looking forward to seeing them because we mentioned Class A1 with Rejoice Christian, Christian Heritage. You have some other teams in that class like Cashin, Hooker. You have to throw them into that conversation. There's some really good teams in Class A1. And I think that Pawhuska is another one that we talked about. Pawhuska is a team that even when you go back to when it was just Class A, earlier in this decade, around 2020, 2021, Pawhuska was a team that was knocking on the door. Cashin ended up being the team that just kind of kept blocking Pawhuska from making it to that state title game and contending for a state championship. On paper, Pawhuska looks like a team that can win a state championship. On the field, I'm looking forward to seeing them for the first time, but I have a feeling they are a team that can contend for that state championship in Class A1. A lot of really tough games ahead on the schedule for the Huskies, but they are off to a really impressive start. Looking forward to getting up to Pawhuska, northern Oklahoma, Osage country, and checking out the Huskies. That's going to be a fun game there on Friday night. So that's a look at the 10 best games for week 3. Again, you can check out more of a breakdown on Prep Redzone Oklahoma right now. No extra games this week. Normally we throw out some extra games to follow along to. There's some pretty good games all over the state, but because of all the bye weeks, because of all the large schools and playing in week 0 and all that, they have district play coming up. So the not a full slate of games. We'll get it more into that later on as we get into the district slates. But we'll bring back the extra games moving forward with the Prep Redzone Oklahoma Preview Show. But now we shift gears and throw it to the coaches. We got another jam-packed show with interviews. Jake Corbin from Choctaw, Mike Dunn from Carl Albert, and Brett Bogert from Heritage Hall. But we lead things off with Choctaw head coach Jake Corbin. And coach, let's just talk about the beginning of this season, because you're coming into this year where you've been knocking on that door. You've been one of those teams that has consistently been a contender in your respective class for the last 5, 6, 7 years. And now you got it done. 2024, the Yellow Jackets win the state championship. And all of a sudden, instead of chasing a state championship, you're defending a state title. That target is squarely on your back now. Just talk about how the start of this year has gone. Has it felt different? Has, the preparation for this season, has anything changed about Choctaw as you prepare for this season now that you're defending a title instead of chasing one?
Yeah, I mean, the boring answer that no one wants to hear is really nothing changes. I mean, the process is the process, and I didn't become a different coach when we won it. We didn't become a different team. You're ultimately just trying to chase the best version of yourself all the time, each and every day. And obviously it's more fun to win them, than it is to not. But like people ask, I went home that night with my wife and watch Bluey with the kids or whatever, went to bed. It's like it's kind of the same as it always is. And got up that Monday, went back to work. Weight room, lifting, all the kind of same stuff. Um, but I think to kind of your point is like, you're probably asking, how do you fight complacency and things like that? We make it clear like this year's team's done nothing. We're in 2025 team has accomplished nothing. And I think that mistakes some people can make is, saying, well, last year this, last year that. It's like, this isn't last year, this is now. And so, we have to experience all those, ups and downs and highs and lows and all the things to forge the kind of team that we want to be able to go win a championship. And, and last year was last year. So we leave those things in the past. At the beginning of the year, we talked about being the attacking state champs, because we're not defending anything. Again, that was last year. It's totally different roster. So, and I know that may sound like coach talk, but that just really is the truth. It really is. Every year is different. Every year is fresh. And, we got to go earn it.
A couple things. One, it 100% sounds like coach talk, but at the same time, it's like it is the truth. It is the truth. Like, yeah, you are the defending champs, but you're still chasing a championship. Like everybody is starts the season 0-0. So it is coach speak, but at the same time, it's 100% the truth.
No.
Thing number two, my son would love the answer about Bluey. Huge fan of Bluey in this household, so he'd be in the same boat. He'd be like,
Yeah.
I couldn't care less
Yeah,
what you did
absolutely.
today. Show me some Bluey and bingo. All right, I want to talk about your quarterback, Landon Gatson, because
Yep.
we've seen flashes of him over the last couple of years. Obviously, dealt with an injury during his sophomore season last year. Specific packages built in for him around Cash Williams, your quarterback last season. Now he has the keys to this offense. And like I said, we could see flashes of him being one of the best quarterbacks in Oklahoma over the last couple of years, but it hasn't fully been his job. Now it is. What kind of growth have you seen from him, and how has he approached the start of this season, knowing that the keys of this offense are in his hands?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I think it's helped him that, like, hey, he's not new to this. He's not new to taking snaps. I mean, he scored 4 touchdowns in the state championship game. 2 in the semis, or 3 in the semis. And so, he has a lot of experience under his belt, even though, as you mentioned, he shared time. So I think that what you've seen from him in these first 2 games is a big improvement in as a passer, as a leader, just his overall understanding of the offense. He's a very bright kid. He's super athletic. It's really hard to get on the ground, as you know, and he's just tough as nails, And when you have a team like that, I think that they rally around that. The team rallies around that kind of kid and his toughness. When you have a QB that's not scared to lower his shoulder, he's not scared to, he doesn't slide. He's going to go ping pong off guys. He steals edges. He blocks. He does all those kind of things. He played linebacker for us a year ago as well. And so I think just having like that kind of kid, as an athlete on your team, can kind of just help, fortify, your team's toughness and like I said, be a rallying cry for the rest of the team, and kind of to your point, like he's been waiting a long time, for this and he's super, super excited about it. And, his work ethic speaks for itself and he's just a tremendous kid. And, last point on that is I think that by the end of the year, you're going to see him emerge as one of, if not the top quarterback in the state.
Speaking of tough to bring down, tough as nails, all of those things, I have a question slash statement that I believe after watching him in person a couple of times last year. Mayor Morgan, your senior running back who's sharing the backfield with Landon there at QB. I believe Mayer is the toughest pound for pound player in the state of Oklahoma because and I had this conversation this summer with someone where you can look at him and the word small can come up, but when in reality, he's just short. He's not small. He is
That's
built.
true.
He is pound for pound the tough, one of the toughest kids to bring down on a football field. He's a bowling ball out there just bouncing off of defenders. Again, not really a question, just more of a statement. Mayor Morgan, pound for pound, toughest kid in Oklahoma. Thoughts?
Yeah, no argument. I think he finished second in state powerlifting, even though it's not really what we do. We kind of do that as a side, a little side hustle, if you will, something fun to do. And no, he's tough as nails. And I think when you watch Mayer, when the ball not in his hands as well, his blocking on the perimeter, his just overall understanding, his ability to as a receiver, he can really as a return man. He's so versatile. He's 175, 180 pounds. At not very tall, and just strong as can be. He's gotten faster in the offseason, running track, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a big point of emphasis for him to continue to get better. And on top of, that, his leadership skills are off the charts, which is why, school like Air Force was after him and why he's committed there.
Now, we're two games in. You had a bye week in week one, but I got to think that I don't know. Do you guys need to fundraise for some gas money because you've
Cheap.
had a heck of a start to the season? Trip to
Yeah.
Lubbock, Texas, trip to Hayes, Kansas to kick off the year, and now you got Bixby on the road again this week, and it'll like I've joked with you before, it'll feel like you're just going down the block
Yeah.
when you're when you're going to the Tulsa area. But two games in, talk to me about your team. What have you learned from your ball club? It's only mid-September, but you can take so much away from wins, losses, things like that. What have you learned about your team through two games?
Yeah, I mean, really kind of what we expected. We're young in some areas, and that's kind of shown in our first two games, against really quality opponents. But, I think that you see like the fight in them, you see the toughness, you see the championship culture in them. I mean, we've always been a hard out, and, we continue to be a hard out, and our kids will fly around and make tackles, and, they feel like they can beat anybody. And, everybody pays attention to record and all those kind of things. And obviously, you want to win every game. But we've done ourselves no favor, with who we've scheduled. At Lubbock, Texas, at Hayes, Kansas, at Bixby. As we mentioned off camera, by the time Friday night's concluded, we'll have traveled 26 hours on the road for our first three games. That's a long time. And and obviously, with that said, it's no excuses. But does travel help you? 6 hours on a bus? No, that's probably not ideal. But with that said, like, we try to build to do hard things because, hard times are coming, hard games are coming, and whether you're, 3-0, 0-3, or somewhere in between those first three non-district games, you're ultimately trying to prepare for week 11, then ultimately, hopefully for a chance in December. And that's what it is. A year ago, we were 1-2 after these first three games. I don't know what will be at the conclusion of Friday, but you didn't. Obviously, I knew these teams were good when we scheduled them. We're not surprised,
Yeah.
by what it is. So you want to get tested so you can go and, I think that we try to be really good problem solvers. But sometimes you have to go kind of expose a problem to be able to solve it. And I'd much rather do that early, in September than in November, December.
Let's talk about Bixby because you mentioned you knew these teams were good, and when it comes to Oklahoma high school football, there's no team that's better than the Bixby
Right.
Spartans right now. They've been dominant through the first 2 weeks or first two games for them on this season. there's been a lot of talk that this might be the best Lauren Montgomery team. Time will tell whether or not that is the case, but obviously they're incredibly talented. What excites you specifically about playing these games that gets, you're going to learn a lot about your team. You're going to the good, the bad, all everything in between. What excites you the most about this matchup on Friday night?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, they are, that have been the best in the state, and have been for quite some time. Coach Montgomery and staff do a fantastic job of, not only, having great teams, but having a great program. And, so it's fun to go test yourself against that kind of team. Obviously I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. That's why we schedule them, and as you mentioned, kind of everybody's chasing that team. And, we were better a year ago from facing them. And when it just everything when you play great teams, it accelerates everything. And so I think it accelerates your growth. It accelerates, as you mentioned, the good, the bad, all that kind of stuff. Because you're forced to get better in a hurry, because you have to. You can't kind of ease into the season. I mean, you really have to go, a blowtorch from the beginning to kind of get going. And that is exciting. It's exciting to go see that. As a competitor, like I tell our kids all the time, I would not do this job if you just showed up and won every week. Like that's not fun. Like I want to be challenged. We talk about there will never, ever, ever be a great victory without tremendous adversity. I mean, that by definition, if you want to have a great victory or do something, outstanding in your life, you're going to have to overcome some, tremendous obstacles. And, we have one in front of us on Friday, like our kids know how good they are. We know how good they are. But, have a lot of respect for them. And if that's the measuring stick, okay, let's go get measured.
681 champ versus 682 champ, number one versus number one, Friday night in Bixby. Going to be a fun time. And then I know for the Choctaw fans out there, they're going to be really happy that this game will be in the past. So now they can have some home games on the schedule coming up.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to, look, one game at a time, but I'm happy to look forward to that fall break matchup, Choctaw and Stillwater. I'm happy to say that I'll be in the house for that one. Already looking forward to that. But before we can talk about that, we got to worry about the Bixby Spartans and the rest of the early district slate. But Coach, thanks so much for your time today. Good luck on Friday, and stay in the film room and off of Disney Plus with the Healer family.
Man, I'll try. Thank you, Michael.
He's head coach Jake Corbin of the Choctaw Yellow Jackets. A couple miles down the road at Carl Albert, speaking of defending champions, they got a big game. And speaking of Stillwater, Stillwater is coming to town to take on the Carl Albert Titans, and Mike Dunn joins us. And Coach, you have an opportunity to go for state championship number 20 this season. Obviously, the expectations are high. How has your team approached this season knowing what they could be, chasing after in November and December?
Well, the great thing about our guys, and I think it comes a lot from our coaching staff, and just that this program has been associated with a lot of the same people for a long, long time since, Coach Rose, even going back before that. But, our kids, the expectation is consistent. I think our coaches are consistent. And then the kids, they know what it takes. And so we really haven't changed anything. It's the process is the process. I joke around all the time that, with spring ball, we have a process there, and it doesn't matter when we get to the fall. Day one install is going to be the same day one install as it was last year, the year before that, and so we just stick to our process, and I think that helps our kids really stay focused at the task at hand.
Through two games, Elijah Matthews, your outstanding junior running back, it seems like he's living up to all the preseason hype. And I know a lot of that preseason hype was courtesy of us at Prep Redzone. But look, I mean, we saw flashes of it the last couple of years that he has the chance to be pretty special. And through the first two games, it looks like he's on that track. I think he had around 200 yards in the season opener, and then only in the first half on Friday night, over 150 yards, only touched the ball 9 times, scored, I think, 4 times.
Yep.
It looks like, as I mentioned, he's living up to all that preseason hype that we had around him.
Yeah, well, no, and to you guys' credit, you have talked about Elijah for a couple years now. You knew about him as a freshman, and coming to spring ball and coming to team camp, and getting to see him as a young guy, and then now getting to see that evolution. Elijah is a special player. He's a guy that he can do it a lot of different ways. He can run through you, he can run around you, he can run by you. He's really shifty, but what I think makes him stand out, what he's great at is he's very patient when it comes to letting blocks set up. And he had a run the other night, it ended up being like a 95-yard touchdown, but it was one of those ones where he had to go. It looked like, over the sideline, you're as a coach, you're saying hit the gas, but he was perfect. I mean, he was kind of slow, just watching these blocks set up, and as soon as they set up, he jetted and he creased it and ended up going for a 95-yard touchdown. Had guys that had angles on him, and he still outran everybody. So Elijah's he's a very he's got a chance to be a really really good one here at Carl Albert. Long line of really good running backs. So yeah, it's no shock to us, I guess. These first two games because we've known about Elijah for a long time, and he's done that since he was in little league football, and so it's good to see it happening. Though offensive line is doing a great job, receivers doing a great job of helping him make that happen.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where for him it seemed like it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. When he was able to become that marquee back, it seemed like these type of performances were just gonna go hand in hand. Obviously, a lot of hard work behind the scenes goes into that, and a lot of hard work from the other guys around him, offensive line, nearly everybody back. That certainly helps.
Right.
Switching to the other side of the ball, the defense has looked great through the first two games. You did give up 8 points in the season opener, so not a start to the season where you're just shutting everybody out for 7 straight games. So
Right.
maybe a bit of a step back this
Right.
season from that historic defense from a year ago. But I
Yep.
got to think that with some new faces on the offensive side of the ball, quarterbacks, some of the receivers, things like that, having a defense that is able to shut down opponents, time after time, it has to take a lot of pressure off that side of the ball.
Yeah, no doubt. That starts with our defensive line. Those guys, they create havoc. They play chaotic. They're just as a coach, they're very fun to watch. As a guy that played defensive line here at Carl Albert, it's fun to watch how the game has kind of evolved. From back whenever we played, when it was, you didn't sit back, but you weren't really an attack style defensive line. You're more of a read and react style. Well, these guys, they're attack and then react, and so it's fun watching them get after it. LeBron Royal, Joe Thomas on the edges have been great. I don't know the exact stats between them, but I know between them there's probably 7 or 8 sacks already. And then the two inside guys with Nick Hill and Keita Perucci have just been outstanding. And then we're breaking in some new guys in the back end, but it helps those four that are returning starters up front when they're getting pressure and they're getting after people and they're creating a new line of scrimmage. It allows our young guys to have a little bit more time to learn and react and to figure out, Friday night football is a little bit faster than it was on Monday night, and so, but our back end, those guys, there's been some, Dustin Anderson and Marquise Evans, our two corners, have played really, really well. Darian Thomas and Bo Davis, our two inside linebackers, played really well. And Makari Johnson and Austin Johnson, both of our nickels, have played really well, and so Jake Farley, our starting weak safety, he had 3 interceptions the other night, had a chance to get a fourth one, and he almost got it, but had 3 interceptions in the game the other night. And we've been watching him do that on JV the last couple of years, and now he's getting his chance. And so that stuff, it's been a lot of fun to watch. And then Jackson Webster, our starting strong safety, he's a really good player on both sides of the ball for us.
Yeah, and for those young secondary guys coming along, it's like, look, just cover your man for 3-4 seconds tops. By that time, we're at the quarterback anyway, so that's all you got to
Right.
do.
Right.
I can understand, hey, just give us a couple seconds. We're gonna get there with that front seven. Coach, what's surprised you about this team? Because obviously there were a lot of new faces. And a lot of the talk this offseason was, look, Carl Albert, you got to replace, 3 guys that are now freshmen at OU, one guy that is a freshman at OSU, the team's all-time leading tackler. So the on the outside looking in, it's like, well, they can't be better than they were last year replacing those guys. What has surprised you, whether it's a unit, a player or two, so far early on this season?
I think our ability to put schemes in and make adjustments in game these first couple of games. I thought that would be a little bit more of a learning curve with some of our young guys because we are doing some things a little bit different just to fit the personnel better. I mean, I think that's something that as coaches you have to do. You have to be flexible and you have to adapt to your personnel. And we've done some things even differently than we did last year. We added more. I'm talking defensively really right now, but we added more early on and threw more stuff at them than we did even a year ago with a bunch of returning starters. And so that's been a pleasant surprise that our guys have picked up. These young guys have picked up a lot of new scheme and picked up a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, and they've run with it. And our in-game adjustments have been really, really good. And so I think the level of maturity that we've been asking for, I think it's coming along even a little bit faster than what we expected, which is a good thing. That's something that's going to help us down the road, especially when we get into those district games towards the end there, and then getting into the playoffs. The more that these guys can move along, and that clock starts ticking even faster, is going to be better for us.
Got to talk about Stillwater coming to
Yeah.
town on Friday night. Huge game, one of the biggest games of the week. That's why we're having you on to talk about your ball club as well as preview this matchup with Stillwater. And look, I wouldn't be completely transparent if I didn't bring up what I said last week on this preview show. Was asked the question, shortly after Washington has their 45-game winning streak snapped. What's the next team with a lengthy winning streak that you could see lose? I brought up Carl Albert and I brought up this Stillwater game. Stillwater looks very improved from last year. Obviously, they made a lot of headlines 2 weeks ago, beating Union on the road. That's a very good offense that's coming to town, a very good team overall, a team that expects to contend for the 6A2 state title. When you look at what they've been able to accomplish and the challenge that they bring, what stands out to you?
Consistency. I feel like our programs align in a lot of different ways. Coach K Wood's been there a long time. They've got a staff that's been together for a long time. It's a lot like ours. I've got to coach against them when I was at Del City. We were in district with them my last 3 years over there, and so got to be around them quite a bit when Tucker was the head coach and Coach K Wood was calling the offense, and now him taking it over and he's just taking it to another level as well. And so I think consistency is where it starts for them. They do what they do. They've done a lot of the same stuff on offense just like we have for a long time. Their kids know their schemes. Defensively, they create all kinds of chaos with what they do, and they do it well. There's a lot of people that think there's not a lot of rhyme and reason to that defense, and there's tons of it. I mean, they know what they're doing, and they are very calculated with what they do. It's so I think that's the first thing. But then you add in that they've got really good players too. I mean, offensively, the two receivers are as good as anybody out there. Deacon Jones and David Thomas, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Those two guys are spectacular, fun to watch. They get after it. Sophomore quarterback is a stud. Watched him He played against us last year on the freshman level, and I knew he was going to be a really good player. The young running back, really good player, and then any offensive line that's coached by Charlie Johnson is going to be really good. So, offensively, they create all kinds of issues. And then, defensively, what that looks like when they come to town. They create problems. They get tackles for a loss. They set you back. They try to get you off schedule. And, that number 7, I think his last name is Cologne. That
Yes.
guy, he's a stud, and they've got him all over. Their front is really, really good. So it'll be a big time challenge.
Look, I'm going to Pawhuska, full disclosure, on Friday to watch them take on Woodland. And you're talking me into maybe switching plans and possibly coming to Carl Albert because the idea of Stillwater's offensive line, which I've already, said multiple times this year, they have the chance to be one of the better offensive line units in the state. You have Charlie Johnson coaching them up. You have the personnel. They have some dudes that can play at the next level. Going against the Carl Albert defensive line, that's a matchup that I want to see. I might make it over there. I don't know. Yeah, I want to see some small school football as well. But it's
Absolutely.
gonna be a fun game. No matter what happens, it's gonna be fun on Friday night. 41 game winning streak on the line. We'll see what happens. Two really good football teams, but the best thing about it is everything's still ahead of both of them. Both Carl Albert and Stillwater want to contend for the state title, regardless of the outcome Friday. Both of them still have that challenge ahead of them. Coach, always fun talking with you. Looking forward to seeing what happens on Friday night, and I'm sure we'll be catching up soon. All right.
Yeah, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Carl Albert head coach Mike Dunn joining us and switching gears to Heritage Hall, a team coming off a bye week and a loss a couple weeks ago to Lincoln Christian. They're looking to bounce back this week against Millwood, another team coming off of a bit of a surprising loss last week. And Brett Bogert, the head coach of the Chargers, joins us. And coach, you get a bye week, an early bye week in the season. What was your team able to get done coming off of a tough loss on the road against Lincoln Christian?
I'd say yes and no. I mean, yes, because obviously we had a good long week of what we needed to work on before heading into another big game versus Millwood. But no, just because I had to sit and kind of stew with that loss for that extra week without getting to a new game plan. And usually that Saturday morning be working on Millwood already or the next opponent already. And, having to sit there, not really have anyone else to play, kind of have to stew in the loss a little longer than you'd like to. But no, overall, it was definitely good for us. We learned a lot. Playing a team like Lincoln this early in the season, they set the standard. And that's where we need to go. And we're not there yet, but we think we did a lot of good things in that game that gives us a bright future and has a chance to reach that level at some point this season.
How quickly do you look? I mean, Lincoln Christian has been the thorn in Heritage Hall's side over the last several years. But at the end of the day, it's still week one. That loss comes in week one. It's still September. How quickly do you remind these guys that, look, man, everything that we're playing for is still ahead of us? It has no bearing on district standings, no bearing on playoff seed. And like you said, it tells you where you are right now, where you need to be. I mean, how quickly do you try to get that across to the guys that, like, look, everything that we're playing for is still ahead of us?
Yeah, I mean, I said it right after the game. I was like, this obviously isn't very fun, boys. I was like, but this feeling's way better than it was in November last year. Just remember, this is September. It's not November or December. So, it definitely is not fun losing, especially, taking it on the chin and, felt like we probably got out physical again, which we don't like to happen. But no, I think the guys got it. I think, we had a really good bye week of practice, did some really physical stuff one of the days. So it was nice to see the guys, really turn the page quicker than probably I turned the page, which is nice with 14 to 18-year-olds. Their memory is a lot shorter than mine. But yeah, no, I think they understood. We did some really good things, and I do think the game was a little closer in the final score. But who cares if you lose 7-6 or 100-6? It's a loss on the score column. That's how we look at it. But no, I think they understand, and we got a mature group that's getting more mature as we go, and I think they understand that a lot of work needs to be done. And I was really proud of the way they responded during this bye week, and now we're really excited to play another football game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, history does say or suggest that there probably is going to come a rematch with the Bulldogs down the line. But before you can worry about that, you got Millwood on Friday night. Before we get into the Falcons, I want to talk about one of your star players, Gerard Williams, the Tulsa commit. I saw him in person last year when you guys played Lincoln in the season opener. Obviously, he's had a terrific career. I don't know at what point, what number of positions he's at now as far as, places on the field that he's played offensively, defensively. It seems like wherever you put him on the field, he's able to make plays. What growth have you seen from him over the last 9 months? Because he had an injury-plagued junior season, but, like I said, when I saw him in that season opener, it looked like he was going to be one of the best players in the state. What kind of growth from him have you seen as an overall player as well as a leader on this team?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he was a little bit. I mean, he was off to a flying start last year, as you said, and a little unfortunate with the injury, but he bounced back and came back, and I think he ended up missing 4 games for us. But when we got him back, he was still Gerard, still a guy that we can count on in the secondary anywhere we put him. Even rewatching that semifinal game from Lincoln, I mean, he was all over the field making tackles in that one as well, even though we didn't have our best night that night. But the things I've really seen and been impressed with him is just his maturity. He's growing up a lot. He's still not the most vocal guy there, but he understands that where he is as his position as a leader, as a senior, voted captain by his teammates. So he understands that there's a little more responsibility on his end. And it's been fun to watch him kind of hold some of his teammates accountable that he might not have, a year ago or even 6 months ago. And they're guys that we really need to go as far as we want to go. So it's been cool to see him grow up on that side of the ball as well. The way he handled his commitment, just his whole recruiting process was really cool to see him grow up. And we coached his older brother. So it's always fun when that happens, and to see these guys I've known him for a long, long time, and now he's a senior, and he's getting to be a leader of this football team. And like you said, he's dynamic on both sides of the football. We use him everywhere. There's no doubt about that. My dad and I have had a conversation that we need to get him the ball more, figure out better ways to get him the ball on offense, figure out ways to get him more in the noise on defense, and that's on us. But he's willing to do anything for the team, and he wants to win, and he's an awesome kid, and we're just excited for the rest of his senior year.
That's always the best response. It's like, hey, just get him the ball. It's like, we're trying. Trust us. We are trying to do that. But let's
No
talk
doubt.
about the rest of your team. Let's talk about some of the guys that maybe we don't know that much about coming into this season, that when you tell the story of Heritage Hall football in 2025, these are guys that are going to be making, a significant impact on just where the Chargers can go this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Rhett Davis has got to be one of the big ones. I've tell anybody who'll listen to me, he's the best blocking tight end I've ever coached. He's really, really good on that side of the ball, and done a better job of getting him the ball a little bit more this season as well. And then he plays a defensive end for us as well, so he rarely leaves the field. But we count on him a lot. David Griffin as well. He's a two-way starter for us at nose guard and guard on offense. Those guys are relentless. They're two other seniors who were voted captains by their teammates that do a great job leading us. A little more vocally than Gerard, but they do it in a good way as well, which you need dynamic leaders. And I'd say on the defensive side of the ball, I've been really excited about our linebackers. Walker Waddell, a junior, who's coming into his second year as being a key player there. Carson Phelps starting in the middle there for us. He had a great offseason. Excited for what he's been doing. Jackson Echok playing in there as well for our other linebacker. But those guys have done a great job. And then the other guy I've got to shout out is Emeka Ekwegu. He's done a great job for us. He's kind of sealed that other corner spot away from Gerard. And he's just been awesome for us. He had a great game against Lincoln. We did well in the passing game against them. We just couldn't stop the run. So I was proud of those guys stepping up. And then some younger guys. Trip Thomas is a sophomore who's just a stud in everything he does. He was the MVP of the baseball team as a freshman. So we're really excited. He had an early camp injury, and we worked him back in a little bit last week, but excited to get him full go on both sides of the ball. He'll kind of play some outside linebacker and receiver for us. So that's just to name a few guys right there that we're really excited about, who've done a great job. And then Max Everett has really stepped up in the backfield for us and gotten a bulk of the carries so far this year, and just been really pleased with the way he runs around. He's not the biggest guy in stature, but he plays big, and he's tough for us. So that's just a handful of guys that have done a great job so far.
You got Millwood on Friday night, and this is I say this every single year, but this has consistently been one of the better non-district rivalry games there in northern Oklahoma City. Obviously, two programs that are dominant in their respective class, but a very weird situation where both teams coming into this game off a loss. Granted, typically you're opening the season against one another, so
Sure.
it's scheduled a little later in the season, but they lose in a surprising Soul Bowl loss on Saturday. What do you want to learn from your team? Obviously, this is also the last non-district game, so after this week, games start counting towards playoff seeding. Other than scoring more points than the other team on Friday night, what's something that you want to accomplish with your ball club as you guys take on the Falcons?
Yeah, it's kind of been an awkward situation, like you said, for Bill with them opening up the Soul Bowl week 2. That couldn't have helped them, and they had some the first game mistakes that they usually don't make, and they always get better. So we expect their best shot on Friday night, that's for sure. But for us, we've got to get better on the offensive line. We've got to protect our quarterbacks better. Granted, Lincoln has one of the best fronts that we'll face. They've got really good players up there, and we definitely struggle to block them. So got to get better there. And then on the defensive side, we've got to tackle better. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We did a really good job kind of controlling Lincoln's passing game, but we could not stop the runs of they're just power runs. Right at us, we just straight up. We missed. I think I counted it. I stopped counting at 40 missed tackles. It was making me sick. But we got to be better tackling. So you can guess during the bye week we did have a good day of some really good tackling, and I think we'll tackle a lot better this week. And but we just got to be more physical as a team as a whole, for sure.
Well, Coach, I appreciate your time as always. A lot of respect for you and the program you built or continue to build at Heritage Hall. Good luck to you and the Chargers on Friday night as you take on Millwood, and I'm sure we'll be catching up soon.
Always enjoy it. I was thinking about it earlier. I think this has been 11 years now we've been chatting, so it's been a lot of fun, Michael, and I always appreciate it.
In all the various medium, radio, podcast, and video, YouTube, like whatever it is, always happy to talk Heritage Hall football with Brett Bogert. Coach, again, thanks for joining me and good luck on Friday. All right.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Now, unfortunately, I did not plan it this way, Coach, but we're leading to our next segment, which is players to watch, and we do them alphabetically. I swear. The first one, Millwood running back Anthony Keys. Coach mentioned needing to stop the run, and Anthony Keys for Millwood, a fantastic running back. Going to be a huge key to Friday night's game against Heritage Hall, one of the tougher running backs in the state to bring down, and he kicks off our week 3 players to watch. Anthony Keys leads off our week 3 players to watch, and despite the loss to Douglas in the Soul Bowl last weekend, Keys still had a really good performance. He's going into his junior season, and Keys has been a playmaker for the Falcons since his freshman year. As a freshman, he split carries with 2 other running backs last year. He became more of the marquee back in the Millwood offense, and this season with so many losses to graduation as well as transfers, Keys is the face of this Millwood offense, in my opinion. Last week, it was a good example of that. He finished the game with over 200 yards of total offense. Whether it's as a running back or a wide receiver out of the backfield, Anthony Keys has the potential to be a big game player. He is undersized from a height standpoint, but at the same time, he's similar to a guy that we mentioned earlier, Mayor Morgan from Choctaw, where he might be short, but he's incredibly built. He's very strong in the lower body. He can bounce off defenders and make them pay. Anthony Keys is going to be a fun player to watch in that matchup with Heritage Hall. And you heard Coach Bogert talk about the fact that Heritage Hall needs to figure out a way to stop the run. Keys is not really a player that you want to try to figure that out against, as he can make defenses pay in a big way. A player that we mentioned quite a bit over the first couple of weeks of the season, Hominy quarterback and linebacker Blaine Hipp. Blaine, in my opinion, we talked with Hominy head coach Caleb Christian last week on this show, and I mentioned how Blaine Hipp is one of the more underrated players in the state of Oklahoma. He started his career as a wide receiver. He's moved over to quarterback starting last season. He also starts for the Bucks on defense as a linebacker. Hominy faces Pawnee. They're looking to bounce back against Pawhuska, and they're going to put the ball in the hands of Blaine Hipp, whether it's throwing the ball, running the ball, making plays on defense, whatever it is. Blaine is able to do it. I'm really impressed with his ability just as an overall playmaker. But again, as you heard Coach Christian last week, as well as myself, like, this kid passes the eye test as soon as he walks on the field. He's a playmaker to watch in Class A2. And I mention this all the time. In those smaller classes like A1 and A2, you need one guy. If you have one guy, you're going to be in the race. And, we've seen Hominy is the perfect example. About a decade ago, Hominy had a player that played quarterback and linebacker, Zaven Collins, who went to TU, then got drafted in the NFL by the Arizona Cardinals. He carried the Hominy Bucks to a state championship during his senior season. Can Hipp do the same for the Bucks this year? I wouldn't rule it out. I think that he's a guy that absolutely can. Bixby standout Braden Presley is our next player to watch. He's off to a great start to his senior season. The Oklahoma State commit has picked up right where he left off last year. You go back to that championship game against Owasso last season, and that was without a doubt, in my opinion, Presley's best performance of his career, and he's just continued that momentum into this season. It took 8 months. He had an 8-month layover, but he just picked up right where he left off. He's looked great so far through the first 2 games. Bixby has looked phenomenal through the first 2 games. They beat Owasso with ease. They beat Sand Springs with ease. Now they take on Choctaw. And it is an interesting matchup from that perspective with Braden Presley, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, because he has the chance to be their leading receiver this season. He's facing a Choctaw defense that has multiple players in their secondary that are either committed or have offers from D1 programs. So that is going to be a fun and interesting matchup to watch in a game that I think Bixby is going to be able to win and possibly win handily, but Braden Presley is still going to be a player to watch on both sides of the ball. Stillwater wide receiver David Thomas is our next player to watch. He's in that game of the week as Stillwater goes on the road to take on Carl Albert. Thomas, in my opinion, is the top prospect in the state's 2028 class. At least right now he is. Obviously, it's still very early. They just started their sophomore seasons, but David Thomas has been an absolute dude since even before he began his freshman season last year with Stillwater. He's quick, he's shifty, he's such a reliable playmaker, and it's going to be fun to watch him go up against a Carl Albert defense that, they have a lot of dudes. This is a Carl Albert defense that has been dominant for quite some time. Is Thomas able to have the same kind of production? But then again, Stillwater, they have dudes everywhere on the offensive side of the ball as well, so it's going to be fun to watch that matchup unfold. But David Thomas, week in and week out, is definitely going to be one of those players to watch for the Stillwater Pioneers as they look to contend for a state championship. Speaking of the Stillwater Carl Albert game, on the other side of the matchup, you have Carl Albert running back Elijah Matthews. We mentioned him earlier in the program with Mike Dunn, the head coach of the Titans, and I don't pat myself on the back often. I'm not even really going to do it now. But we did talk about Matthews as being that breakout star for this season because you could see glimpses of it. Obviously, he had seniors ahead of him on the depth chart. He had to kind of limit what he was able to do offensively because he just didn't have the opportunities. But now he is that marquee back, and he's living up to the hype so far. He's been outstanding through the first couple of games. I think he had over 200 yards in the first game, over 150 last week, and now he does it against a Stillwater defense that is aggressive. They attack, they try to slow you down before you get going, and so it's going to be fun to see as this is going to be the first real test for Elijah Matthews and the rest of this Carl Albert offense as they take on a very stout Stillwater defense. Pacola is desperate to turn things around in that rivalry against Vian. And, look, it depends on your definition of rivalry. Some rivalries where it's been completely one-sided. Is it a rivalry? Pacola's trying to turn it into one, and they're trying to close the gap between them and Vian. Job Posey, their junior quarterback, is our next player to watch as the Indians look to continue their hot start on the offensive side of the ball specifically. Posey is a quarterback that I think more people need to start paying attention to. You started to see it last year as he made the start as a sophomore, and he can throw the absolute piss out of the ball. I mean, you hear it all the time at the next level and even at the NFL level, the moon ball and the deep ball, and Posey has that. He has that in his repertoire. As he has the ability to beat defenses deep. He has speed around him at the wide receiver position where they're able to go deep and they're able to beat their man for Posey to lay it in there for a big gain. So he's a fun quarterback to watch, and he's a guy who could make up the difference in this matchup and really contend with Vian. But ultimately, the big picture is to contend for a state championship. Having Posey run this offense is something that I think will help them in their pursuit of contending for the Class A1 state title. Down in Class A2, you have Woodland as they take on Pawhuska. Jatson Terry is the player to watch for the Woodland Cougars. He is the do-it-all, offense, defense, special teams, wherever you need him to be. He has the potential to make a play wherever he is on the field. I mentioned earlier how Woodland, coming into this season, they had to replace so many, key players from last year's championship team that it was kind of a given that they were going to take somewhat of a step back. But for Terry, he was one of those players that we kind of spotlighted before the season that, despite the losses to graduation, having a guy like him back is going to help the Cougars, and he's without a doubt going to be their top playmaker. Now, Pawhuska knows that, and so they're going to be keying in to try to slow him down. But it's going to be fun to see him in person again this week on Friday night. As the last couple times we've seen him, he's shown that he can break a game wide open. We mentioned the Choctaw-Bixby game earlier. Choctaw quarterback Landon Gatson is our next player to watch as he has, we talked with Jake Corbin earlier in the program, how he's taken that next step. He's become more of a leader. He understands that this is his offense now after getting plenty of playing time last year as a junior, but now he is the guy at quarterback for Choctaw. And you heard Coach Corbin say this, and I completely agree with this statement. By the end of this season, Gadsden is going to prove that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the state because the potential has always been there. You just have to start matching the production with the potential. He's already starting to do that over the first couple of weeks, and now he gets his toughest test because this Bixby defense is not going to be easy on him. But when you look at the big picture again, I think that Gadsden does have the chance to be, one of, if not the best quarterback in this class. He's definitely going to be in the conversation by the end of the season. He's going to have Choctaw in contention for another state championship by the end of the year. And, iron sharpens iron, and he's going to get plenty of that on Friday night against a very good Bixby defense. Rejoice Christian taking on Christian Heritage. And Rejoice Christian, they have playmakers all over the place. But look out for running back Noah Goodwin. Because of all the playmakers that Rejoice Christian has, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, they have multiple guys that have D1 offers. And so I get it. You can kind of overlook some of the other key pieces of this Rejoice offense. But when you break the Eagles down and when you really look at what makes them go, Noah Goodwin is a big part of that conversation. He has been outstanding over the last season and a half. He's been such a big part of what they've done offensively. And you go back to that state championship game, he was incredibly productive. So as they go on the road to take on Christian Heritage, obviously they're wanting to get a huge win to bounce back from that loss 2 weeks ago against Cassia Hall. Watch out for Noah Goodwin because he's starting to pick up some momentum as a true prospect in that 2026 class. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of production he has this week. And finally, Elgin running back Ritson Meyer. He's one of the best players in the state, so he could honestly be on this list just about any single week. But as they take on Newcastle, they're coming off a bye week. Meyer and the rest of the Owls are wanting to pick up some momentum as they go into district play. I mentioned it earlier when we broke down that, the non-district slate for Elgin, looking ahead to the district slate for the Owls. They might not be tested the rest of the way. This is a very good football team that has the chance to contend for a state championship. They might not be tested the rest of the season, so this will be more than likely their last test as they face a team that made it all the way to the 5A semifinals a year ago. Meyer has already solidified himself as one of the state's best players. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's able to do in another tough game against a really good opponent. All right, so that gives you a look at the 10 players to watch heading into week 3. Before we get out of here, we want to give you a sneak peek at the Player of the Year watch list. Every single Thursday on Prep Redzone Oklahoma, we add 3 more players to the Player of the Year watch list. And coincidentally, the 3 additions this week do not play this week, so it's not like they're playing. You're not going to be able to catch them on a Thursday or a Friday night, but they'll be right back on the field next week to open up district play. We kick things off on the watch list with Jones quarterback Asen Hansen. We talked about him last week on this show. He was a player to watch as they took on Bethany, and they absolutely dominated that game. Hansen has gotten off to a really good start, and he's a player that I've talked about for a couple of years now. Before he was Jones's QB1, just because Jones is one of those programs that produce quarterbacks year after year after year. Before he was a quarterback, he was actually a standout on the offensive side of the ball as a running back, utility guy, receiver, whatever they needed, he was able to do. He was just an overall playmaker. And now, 2 seasons in as QB1, Hansen has continued to be that playmaker. He's rolled up the numbers in the passing game. He's done the same as I believe he's leading the Longhorns in rushing as well. I think that was the case last year. So he is, without a doubt, one of the best athletes in Class 2A1. We mentioned it last week how Jones has a legitimate chance to contend for the state championship in 2A1. And a lot of that has to do with having Hansen at QB. He can beat defenses in a variety of ways. He's already proved that this season. He'll continue to do so this year. And I think that Jones has as good a chance as any in Class 2A1 chasing that state championship. Asen Hansen, one of the best players, not only in 2A1, but in Oklahoma so far this season. Owasso running back Jaden Hall is our next entry to the Player of the Year watch list. As he wrapped up his junior season last year, you could start seeing that he was turning the page and, taking that next step as a true marquee running back. Although, through the first couple of seasons in his career, he had to split carries with two other running backs in that Owasso backfield. And of course, look, the Rams, they're going to want to be as balanced as they can be. But through the first, few weeks of the season, Jaden Hall has really shown that he's one of the best parts, if not the best part of this Owasso offense. You hand him the ball, he takes direct snaps, whatever it is, and he's able to score from just about anywhere on the field. He's already proven that this season. He proved that at the end of last season in that state championship game. So Jaden Hall has been incredibly productive. Last week, he had nearly 200 yards, multiple touchdowns in the win over Sand Springs. Even in those first two games that they lost against Bixby and Jinx in back-to-back weeks, Hall was still able to be very productive and have good performances. So he's definitely someone to watch the rest of the season as Owasso looks to contend once again for the 6A1 crown. Jaden Hall, one of the best players, not only in 6A1, but in the state of Oklahoma at this time. Another 6A1 team, Broken Arrow Broken Arrow receiver and defensive back Samaj Stanford, going into his junior season, obviously made a lot of headlines this offseason, making the move from Jinx over to Broken Arrow. But Samaj is without a doubt one of the best players, if not the best player in the 2027 class. He's been that guy since his freshman season. You ask anybody who has coached him, whether it was, before at Jinx or now at Broken Arrow, even in the off season with various 7-on-7 clubs, they always say the same thing about Samaj, and that he is the, most educated football player. Like, he's the smartest football player. And that was even the case as a freshman. So he is so, he's so talented in every single aspect of the game. Obviously, the physical attributes are there. The production is there. He had a really good performance against Mustang in all three phases, offense, defense, and special teams. So everything, points to Samaj Stanford being one of the best players in the state of Oklahoma. So it was only a matter of time before he is added to this watch list as well as one of the state's very best. All right, so that's a look at this week's Player of the Year watch list additions. Again, you can check out more of a breakdown online at Prep Redzone Oklahoma. On Thursday is when that article will come out. And finally, before we get out of here, we want to give you a sneak peek at what to expect on Prep Redzone Oklahoma from now until the weekend and early next week. As I mentioned, we have the Player of the Year breakdown coming out on Thursday. We have our First Look Friday post coming out on Friday. That's been a fun series that we've done over the last couple of weeks, really starting in week one. We take a look at 5 different players that I've never written about on Prep Red Zone, whether it's guys that have just kind of flown under the radar, guys that are already having breakout seasons this year, or guys that I've known about but just haven't had the chance to get around to writing about them. We do that on Friday with our First Look Friday post. That'll come out then. We'll also have coverage from 2 different games this week, one on Thursday, one on Friday, social media, website, YouTube channel, all those things. Thursday night, we're going to be in Perkins as Perkins Tryon will host Webster. Last, non-district game for Perkins Tryon before a big game next week against Sulphur. So we'll be there for that one on Thursday. And on Friday, we're going up to Northern Oklahoma, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Pawhuska hosting Woodland. So that one should be a fun one. We'll have highlights from both of those games. We'll have social media updates. You can follow us on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Prep Red Zone OK. And then we'll also have some stuff on the website as well, talking about some of the best players that we watched in those games that you can check out on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma. On Saturday, you can get a complete breakdown on Week 3 with our Week 3 roundup. We'll take a look at some of the top stories, some of the top outcomes in those games that we talked about here on this show. And even, if something surprising happened, we'll be breaking it down on the Week 3 roundup. On Sunday, we'll have our weekly top performer feature. Again, we had nearly 30 different players recognized for Week 2. We want to continue to have at least that every single week, if not more. And you can check those top performer features out every Sunday on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma. And then we'll start Monday and we'll start next week's coverage with our updated rankings. That's a bit of a change. Last couple of years we put that on Saturday. Now we're going to put it out on Monday, so you can look at the week 4 rankings on Monday before district play begins that week, and the games start counting towards playoff seeding, district standings, all of those things. So it's starting to heat up across Oklahoma, and we're looking forward to breaking it all down right here on the Prep Redzone Oklahoma Preview Show. So for one final time, my thanks to Choctaw head coach Jay Corbin, Carl Albert head coach Mike Dunn, and Heritage Hall head coach Brett Bogert. I'm your host, Michael Knight, the director of Prep Redzone Oklahoma. Looking forward to breaking everything down next week, once again, right here, every single Wednesday on the Prep Redzone Oklahoma Preview Show. Until then, enjoy the football, everybody.